Welcome to Void Case Files. Before we dive into tonight's investigation, I need your help. We're pushing to reach 1,000 subscribers by the new year, and we're committed to bringing you daily videos filled with the most disturbing cases from the edges of reality. If you enjoy what you're about to hear, hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey into the unknown. Now, let's begin. Imagine a forest so old, it remembers a time before humans. An officer steps into its shadows on a routine search, but what he finds isn't just a missing person. It's a silent, ancient observer that has been watching us evolve, waiting. What if the very ground beneath your feet holds a consciousness older than recorded history? This is the account of Deputy Garrett Hollis, a 16-year veteran of the Cascade County Sheriff's Office in Montana, who responded to what should have been a simple missing hiker case in the Little Belt Mountains. What he discovered would challenge everything he thought he knew about the world we live in. The call came in at 4:23 on a Friday afternoon in October. Garrett was finishing paperwork when dispatch crackled through about a missing hiker. David Brennan, 32, photographer from Bozeman, hadn't checked in with his brother after a day hike near Memorial Falls. Should have been back by 3 p.m. It was now past 4:30. Garrett grabbed his gear without hesitation. 16 years patrolling Cascade County meant he knew every trail between Great Falls and White Sulphur Springs like the back of his hand. The Little Belt Mountains were his territory, an isolated range of peaks that rose from the Montana plains like an island, 60 miles of dense forest and ancient rock completely separated from the surrounding terrain. He'd pulled lost hikers out of there dozens of times. This should be routine. The drive out to Memorial Falls took 40 minutes. Highway 89 cut through the mountains, winding past stands of lodgepole pine that had stood for centuries. Garrett arrived at the trailhead at 5:17 with maybe an hour of good light left. A single vehicle sat in the parking area, a blue Subaru with Bozeman plates. A man paced beside it, phone pressed to his ear, panic evident in every movement. Eric Brennan spotted Garrett's patrol vehicle and rushed over before he'd even killed the engine. The family resemblance was strong. Same build, same dark hair, but Eric's face was drawn tight with worry. "Thank God you're here. I've called him 20 times. David never does this. He's the most reliable person I know." Garrett pulled out his notepad, keeping his voice calm and professional. "Walk me through his plans today." He drove up from Bozeman this morning to photograph the old-growth forest above the Upper Falls. Nature photography. He does it for tourism magazines. Said he'd be done by 3 at the latest. When he didn't answer by 4, I drove up from Missoula. His phone goes straight to voicemail. Did he mention going off the marked trail? Eric hesitated, and Garrett knew the answer before he spoke. He wanted to find the really ancient trees. Said the best shots were always beyond where the tourists go. That complicated things. Memorial Falls was an easy trail, barely a mile round trip, popular with families. But past the Upper Falls, the mountains shot up 4,000 feet through unmarked wilderness. Dense forest, game trails that dead-ended at cliff faces, terrain that could swallow an experienced hiker if they weren't careful. "I'll find him," Garrett said, shouldering his pack. "Stay here. If search and rescue shows up, send them after me." He radioed his position to dispatch and started up the trail. The path was well maintained, hard-packed earth winding through towering pines. The sound of falling water grew louder as he climbed, and within 15 minutes he reached Lower Memorial Falls. 60 feet of white water cascading over dark rock into a pool so clear he could see every stone on the bottom. No sign of David. The trail continued to the Upper Falls, a smaller cascade that marked the official end of the maintained path. Beyond this point, only a faint boot path continued into the wild country above. Garrett knelt and examined the ground. Fresh prints, size 11 or 12, heading upward into terrain that got serious fast. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Hollis, going off trail above Upper Falls, following tracks. Log my position." The response crackled back. "Copy. SAR is rolling. ETA 45 minutes. Garrett followed the boot prints up a steep slope. The forest changed within minutes. The trees grew massive, their trunks ancient and scarred by centuries of Montana winters. He passed a fallen Douglas fir that had to be 300 years old based on the growth rings visible in its exposed heartwood. The temperature dropped sharply, maybe 15 degrees colder than at the trailhead. The air felt thick, pressing against his skin like the atmospheric pressure had shifted. 20 minutes of hard climbing brought him to something that didn't make sense. David's camera bag sat propped against a moss-covered boulder, expensive equipment just sitting there in the wilderness. Garrett opened it carefully. Everything was inside. Extra lenses, memory cards, battery pack, all the gear a professional photographer would need. Why abandon it? He turned on the camera and scrolled through the images. Waterfalls, aspen groves in autumn gold, a deer drinking from a creek. Standard nature shots. The last photo had a timestamp of 12:18 p.m. and showed a clearing ahead, surrounded by trees larger than any Garrett had seen. But something was wrong with the image. The colors were oversaturated, almost psychedelic, like the camera had captured wavelengths that shouldn't exist in natural light. He left the bag and continued climbing. The boot prints led directly toward where that clearing should be. Garrett emerged from the tree line at 6:42 p.m. Dusk was settling over the little belts, the sky fading from blue to deep purple between the canopy overhead. What he saw stopped him cold. The clearing was maybe 70 feet across, roughly circular, ringed by the oldest trees he'd encountered in 16 years of mountain work. These weren't just big, they were ancient, 12 to 15 feet in diameter, rising 200 feet into the darkening sky. Trees that had been saplings when the first Europeans crossed the Atlantic. Maybe older, but every single one leaned away from the clearing's center, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable once you saw it. And the bark on the sides facing inward was twisted, warped, like the trees had spent centuries trying to grow away from something they didn't want to face. In the center was a patch of bare earth, perfectly circular, about 20 feet across. No grass, no fallen pine needles, nothing. The soil was black and had a texture that made his eyes water when he tried to focus on it. Not wet, not dry, something in between that his brain refused to process correctly. And in the exact center of the bare patch was a depression, human-sized, too symmetrical to be natural, like someone had pressed themselves into soft clay and left a perfect imprint. No footprints led to it, no tracks led away. It was just there, waiting. Garrett's GPS started glitching, numbers jumping across the screen like the satellites had lost their minds. He tried his radio. Static answered him, thick and rhythmic, almost like breathing. He set up his portable LED lantern on a rock and aimed it at the clearing. The light seemed to stop at the edge of the bare earth, like something invisible was absorbing it. "David Brennan!" his voice echoed off the massive trees. "Cascade County Sheriff's Office, if you can hear me, call out." Silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a forest at dusk, but an absence of sound so complete it felt like pressure against his eardrums. No wind, no birds settling for the night, no insects. Even Belt Creek, which should be audible from this elevation, had gone silent. His GPS flickered and showed his elevation as negative 600 feet. According to the device, he was standing deep underground. Movement at the edge of his vision made him spin, flashlight beam cutting through the gathering darkness. A figure stood between two massive pines on the far side of the clearing. David Brennan looked unharmed. Clean clothes, no visible injuries, standing upright. But something was profoundly wrong with the way he held himself. Too still, like a mannequin posed to look human. His eyes didn't blink when Garrett's light hit them. "David?" Garrett's hand moved toward his weapon without conscious thought. "I'm Deputy Hollis. Your brother's worried about you." No response. David's eyes stayed fixed on the center of the clearing, pupils dilated wide despite the bright flashlight pointed at his face. Garrett moved closer, slowly, watching for any sign of injury or distress. "Can you hear me? Are you hurt?" David's chest rose and fell in measured breaths. When Garrett got within 10 feet, he could see that the pupils weren't just dilated, they were reflective, catching the light like an animal's eyes. "David, I need you to respond. You've been missing for over 6 hours." Finally, David spoke. His voice was his own, but flat, without inflection, like someone reading words in a language they didn't understand. "It showed me how old it is." Garrett stopped. His training screamed head trauma, shock, hypothermia, but David's stance was too controlled, too purposeful. "What showed you?" "I need you to focus. We have to get off this mountain. It's been here since the glaciers." David's eyes never moved from the clearing's center, since before them, since before us. Garrett approached carefully, checking for visible wounds. David's body temperature felt normal through his jacket. No blood, no signs of exposure. But his eyes, those reflective pupils, that wasn't normal. "What are you talking about? What happened to you up here?" David turned his head to look at Garrett, the movement mechanical and precise. The forest, the real one, the one underneath. He pointed at the depression in the center of the bare earth. "There's something down there. Mycelium, but older than any fungus should be. It was here when ice covered this land. When the Blackfeet first crossed into Montana. When Lewis and Clark passed through these valleys. It's been watching the whole time." Garrett knew about mycelium, fungal networks that spread through soil. He'd read about the massive colony in Oregon, thousands of years old, one of the largest organisms on Earth. But the way David spoke about it with that empty voice made it sound like something else entirely. "We're leaving. Now." He reached for David's arm. David didn't resist, but he didn't move either. It was like trying to pull a rooted tree from the ground. "I can't leave. It wants me to stay. It wants to show you too." The ground trembled. Not an earthquake, nothing that simple. This was rhythmic, pulsing, like something massive breathing beneath their feet. The vibration came from directly under the bare earth. Garrett's radio erupted with static, and within the white noise he could hear it. That same pulse, that same rhythm. Like whatever was down there had infected the radio waves. He dropped the radio and focused on David. "Whatever you think happened, you're experiencing some kind of episode. We need to get you medical attention." David took a step toward the clearing center. "Do you know what it's like to be conscious for 10,000 years? To watch ice sheets advance and retreat? To feel forests grow and burn and grow again? To witness every human who's ever walked these mountains, knowing you'll still be here long after they're dust?" Garrett drew his weapon, not aiming it but making it visible. "Stop, right there." David knelt at the edge of the bare earth and placed both hands on the black soil. The pulse in the ground synchronized with his breathing, became one rhythm, and the depression in the center began to widen. The earth didn't collapse. It moved deliberately, spiraling inward like something was opening from below. "It's been alone for so long," David said quietly. "Buried in the bedrock. It felt the glaciers. It felt the mountains rise. It felt the first trees after the ice melted. Thousands of years of humans walking above it, never knowing it was there, aware and watching. The depression was 6 feet across now, and Garrett could see something in the depths. Not darkness, a surface that glistened with bioluminescence, pale blue-green light pulsing in rhythm with the ground. Fungal growth, but massive, ancient, branching down into the earth like roots that went deeper than anything natural should reach. David looked back at him, and his eyes were fully reflective now, mirror-bright in the lantern light. "It wants you to understand what we are from its perspective. Brief sparks in an endless dark." The visions hit Garrett like a physical blow. He wasn't choosing to see them. They were being pushed into his mind. 12,000 years ago, ice miles thick crushing the mountains, glaciers that had persisted since the last ice age. He felt the ice retreat, revealing scoured bedrock, watched lichens colonize the stone over centuries, breaking it down into soil, saw the first grasses take root, the first trees sprout from seeds carried by wind, witnessed forests grow tall, burn in catastrophic fires, grow again from the ashen-rich soil. Time compressed and expanded. Glacial lakes formed and drained. Massive animals roamed. Species that no longer existed. Mammoths and dire wolves and things that had no names because they'd vanished before humans could name them. He watched them disappear, not in catastrophe, but in slow fade. Climate shifting, prey changing, evolution moving on. Then humans. First, peoples following the game, living with the land's rhythms, their campfires tiny points of light in the vast wilderness. Centuries of them, generation after generation, in harmony with something they never knew was watching from below. New humans, Lewis and Clark in 1805, mapping territory that had been home to thousands for millennia, but was undiscovered by European standards. Miners in the 1880s tearing into the mountains for silver and sapphires, building towns that would be abandoned within decades. Neihart, Monarch, Belt, the railroad through the canyon, hauling ore that was already running out. All of it temporary, all of it brief, all of it observed by something that had existed since before human civilization began. Garrett ripped himself away from the visions, gasping like he'd been underwater. He focused on breathing, on the cold air in his lungs, the weight of his gear, the solid ground beneath his boots, even if it was pulsing like a heartbeat. David watched him with that tilted head curiosity. "You're fighting it. Most people don't. They want to see more. Don't you want to know everything? All that history, all those memories, preserved forever in its network. Your brother is at the trailhead." Garrett's voice was steadier than he felt. "Eric's waiting for you. He drove up from Missoula because he was worried." Something flickered across David's face. Real emotion, breaking through whatever influence had taken hold. "Eric, you promised him you'd be back by 3 p.m. "I did." Confusion now, conflict visible in his expression. "I promised." The depression was 8 feet across. Fungal structures were emerging from it, mushroom-like growths with geometry that hurt to look at, angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. David swayed between the clearing and Garrett's voice. It's offering something, to merge with the network, to become part of its memory. Everything I am would be preserved forever. I'd know everything it knows, see everything it's seen, experience time from an eternal perspective. What would it cost? The question seemed to anchor David. He thought about it, really thought, the first sign of independent reasoning Garrett had seen. Everything that makes me myself. I'd become part of something that remembers everything but feels nothing. No joy, no pain, just awareness, observation, consciousness without emotion. Forever. He looked at Garrett with eyes that were slowly clearing, the reflective quality fading. Is that transcendence or just a different kind of death? It's death, Garrett said firmly. Your memories wouldn't be yours. They'd be its, and Eric would lose his brother. Lights appeared through the trees downslope, voices calling out. The search and rescue team. The effect was instant. The depression stopped expanding. The pulse slowed. The fungal structures retreated back into the earth like flowers closing at night. David staggered, caught himself against a tree. His eyes were his own again, frightened and confused. They're coming. It doesn't want too many. Too much noise, too much chaos. It prefers one mind at a time. By the time 6 search and rescue team members pushed through the tree line, led by Deputy Rachel Klein, the ground looked almost normal. "Hollis, we've been searching for 3 hours. Your radio's been dead the whole time." Garrett checked his watch. 10:51 p.m. 3 hours. It had felt like both much longer and much shorter, time stretched and compressed in that clearing. The medics surrounded David immediately, checking vitals while Rachel approached Garrett with questions in her eyes. Pulse elevated, pupils dilated but reactive, temperature normal at 98.6. No visible injuries. "Sir, what's your name?" "David Brennan. I'm a photographer." "Do you know what day it is?" "Friday, October 11th. His eyes drifted to the center of the clearing where the depression had sealed itself, leaving only a faint indentation. I saw something under the ground, something old. They loaded him onto a stretcher. Rachel lingered with Garrett as the team started the descent. "What happened up here?" Garrett watched the clearing one last time. The soil in the center pulsed once, so subtle he almost missed it. Rachel didn't seem to notice. "I don't know, but we should keep people away from this area." The descent took 2 hours. David murmured about depth and time and patience. Eric was waiting at the trailhead, and when he saw his brother on the stretcher, the relief on his face was overwhelming. The ambulance took David to Benefice Healthcare in Great Falls, while Garrett spent another hour on his incident report, carefully choosing words that wouldn't sound insane. Subject found disoriented. Possible environmental exposure. Recommend psychiatric evaluation. He didn't mention the visions or what he'd seen in that depression. Who would believe him? 5 days later, Garrett visited David in the psychiatric ward. The room had a view of the Missouri River, and David sat in a chair watching the water flow past. All his tests had come back normal. Neurological scans, blood work, everything. No toxins, no infections, no explanation for what had happened. But he was different. He spoke slowly with long pauses, like language had become something foreign he had to translate. "Deputy Hollis, I hoped you'd come." "How are you feeling?" David considered the question. "I feel everything and nothing. Does that make sense?" "Not really." "I remember what it showed me, every detail. I close my eyes and I can see glaciers melting over centuries, feel the first trees taking root, know what it's like to exist for 10,000 years. He looked at Garrett. "The doctors think I hallucinated from hypothermia, but my body temperature was normal. No frostbite, no exposure, nothing they can measure, so they invent explanations that fit their reality." "What do you think happened?" "I think I touched something that's been conscious since the Ice Age, a fungal network spanning the entire Little Belt Range, aware and observing. I think it's been alone for so long it wanted to share what it knows, to not be solitary anymore. Eric's been here every day." "I know, he's a good brother." David's expression was fond but distant, but when I look at him now, it's like I'm seeing him from very far away, from a time scale where a human life is just a blink. We're so brief, Deputy. We burn bright for such a short time, and then we're gone, and it just keeps existing, keeps watching, keeps remembering. "You're scaring him." "I'm scaring myself." David met his eyes. "Do you dream about it?" Garrett did. Every night. Dreams of standing in that clearing, feeling the pulse, watching forests rise and fall like ocean waves, seeing ice advance and retreat, history unfolding from a perspective that was eternal and inhuman. He always woke before accepting the invitation, before stepping into that perfect depression. "Yes," David nodded. "It touched us both, but you fought it. You have family, wife, 2 daughters. Hold on to them. They're your anchor to human time, to moments and days instead of epochs. Without that, it's easy to drift." 3 days later, David was discharged. Medically, there was nothing wrong with him. Eric took him back to Bozeman, but David didn't stay. Within a month, he'd taken a job with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks as a backcountry ranger in the Little Belts. He volunteered for solo patrols, overnight shifts in remote areas. He was reliable and professional, but the other rangers noticed something off about him. The way he'd stand motionless for hours just watching the forest. The sheriff's office investigated the clearing. Garrett guided a team back, and they collected soil samples that went to Montana State University. The results came back 2 weeks later. The soil contained a massive mycelial network of unknown species, genetically dated between 8 and 12,000 years old. It would have survived the last ice age, multiple glacial periods, complete ecosystem transformation. One of the largest and oldest living organisms ever discovered in North America. Mycologists wanted to study it. The sheriff's office quietly closed the area, citing dangerous terrain. The decision came from high enough up that Garrett suspected someone else had experienced something similar. He requested reassignment to Great Falls City Patrol. He couldn't work the Little Belts anymore. Every time he looked at those mountains, he felt the pull, the invitation, the promise of understanding everything that ancient consciousness had witnessed. The dreams continued. He'd wake at 3 a.m. convinced he could hear the pulse beneath his house. His wife noticed, but didn't press. He'd talk when ready, she said. He wasn't sure he ever would be. 6 months passed. Winter became spring. Snow melted in the high country. Garrett tried not to think about what was beneath those peaks, growing through ancient stone, patient and aware. April 15th. He was responding to a call near Kings Hill Pass when he found David standing beside a fish and wildlife truck, looking out over the mountains. "Flat tire," David said before Garrett could ask. "Tow truck's coming. I'm fine." They stood in silence, watching the peaks stretch to the horizon. "You still go back," Garrett said, "to the clearing, sometimes, just to remember what it feels like to be connected to something eternal." David's voice was calm. It's still there, still waiting, still aware. "What does it want?" "I don't think it wants anything. It just is. but I think it gets lonely in ways we can't understand. Imagine being conscious for 10,000 years with nothing that can comprehend you, unable to communicate, unable to share what you know. So it showed you. It offered to share. There's a difference. David studied him. It offered you too, in the dreams. Every night. Are you tempted? Garrett thought of his daughters, Emma and Lily, 7 and 4, real and present and fleeting. They'd grow up and age and die within a geological blink, but they were his. They mattered in ways that ancient network couldn't understand. No. Good. Hold on to them. They're your anchor. David smiled. I have my brother, my work, I'm useful, I'm present. But I also know that beneath my feet is something that's witnessed the entire history of these mountains, that will be here long after every human is gone. Does that comfort you, or terrify you? Both. David checked his watch as a tow truck appeared in the distance. Can I ask you something? Do you think we're alone, in the universe? Garrett considered it. I used to wonder. Now I know we've never been alone, we just didn't recognize what consciousness looked like. We searched the stars while it was under our feet the whole time. That's what I think too. David looked back at the mountains. Something's been watching since before we existed, before our species evolved. It'll watch long after we're gone, after everything we've built crumbles to nothing. They shook hands, and Garrett drove away. In his rearview mirror, David stood at the overlook, perfectly still, watching the mountains or being watched by them. Deputy Garrett Hollis still patrols Great Falls, never the Little Belts. David Brennan still ranges the backcountry, volunteering for overnight shifts alone in the wilderness. His brother says he's functional but changed, like part of him never left that clearing. The grove remains, the clearing's still there, that perfect circle of bare earth. Scientists confirmed the network is one of the oldest organisms in North America, surviving the Ice Age, glaciers, fires, complete ecosystem transformation. It was ancient when the first humans crossed into the Americas. It was conscious when the last mammoths died. It watched civilization rise from its position deep in the bedrock, patient and observing. But here's what keeps me awake. If something that ancient, that patient, that vast, has been conscious beneath Montana all along, what else is watching? How many other consciousnesses lie buried beneath our feet, observing our brief existence? David says it's not hostile, just lonely, just aware, just waiting. I'm not sure which is more terrifying, that we're alone in the universe or that we've never been alone at all, that something vast and patient and utterly alien has been watching from beneath the ground we walk on, witnessing everything we do with the dispassionate interest of something that measures time in epochs. The little belts are still there, the clearing's still there, the network's still there, spreading through ancient stone, aware and observing, waiting for the next mind curious or desperate enough to accept its invitation, to see what it's seen, to know what it knows, to become part of something eternal. This has been Void Case Files. If this made you think twice about walking alone in ancient forests, hit that subscribe button. We're racing toward 1,000 subscribers by New Year's, and with your help, we'll get there. Tomorrow we'll explore another case that exists between the known and impossible. Until then, watch the shadows. In the Little Belt Mountains, the forest is always watching back, and it has all the time in the world.